Hi friends, I am Krishna Kumar, Assistant Professor at School of Law, Dr. Hari Singh Gaur Vishwavidyalaya, Sagar, Madhya Pradesh. Today, in this lecture, we will have an overview of the Constitution of India. This topic is divided into 6 modules. Module 1, Introduction. Module 2, Influence of other constitutions. Module 3, Preamble. Module 4, Parts of the Constitution. Module 5, Schedules of the Constitution. Module 6, Major Amendments of the Constitution. Module 7, Conclusion. According to Wade and Phillips, Constitution means a document having special legal sanctity which sets out the framework and the principal functions of the organs of government of a state and declares the principles governing the operations of those organs. A constitution is a written document containing a set of rules for a government. It is the supreme law of land which defines the fundamental political principles, establishing the structure, procedure, powers and duties of government institutions, and sets out fundamental rights and active principles and the duties of citizens. The term constitution can be applied to any overall law that defines functioning of a government. It can also be referred as the basic law of land or the fundamental law of the land. The Constitution of India or the Constitution of the Republic of India is the world's lengthiest written constitution which came into effect on 26 January 1950. It contains 22 parts, 395 articles and 12 schedules. It is drawn extensively from Western legal traditions in its outline of the principles of liberal democracy. It follows a parliamentary pattern on one side, while on the other it embodies fundamental rights on the lines of Bill of Rights declared by the United States Constitution. Indian Constitution establishes a federal system in which residual powers of legislation remain with the central government, similar to that in Canada. The Constitution provides detailed lists dividing up of the powers between centre and the state governments, as in Australia, and it elaborates a set of directive principles of state policy, as does the Irish Constitution. Indian Constitution is not the product of any revolution, but of research and deliberations of a body of eminent representatives of the people who sought to improve upon the existing administration, makes a retrospect of the constitutional development indispensable for a proper understanding of this constitution. Therefore, in order to establish a proper system of government, a number of concepts have been borrowed from other countries. As from Britain, we borrowed parliamentary form of government, the idea of single citizenship, the ideal of the rule of law, institution of speaker and his role, lawmaking procedure established by law. From United States of America, we have borrowed Charter of Fundamental Rights, federal structure of the government, electoral college, independence of judiciary and separation of powers among the 3 branches of government, judicial review, president as supreme commander of armed forces, equal protection under law. From Ireland, we have borrowed directive principles of state policy. From Australia, we have borrowed freedom of trade and commerce within the country and between the states, power of the national legislature to make laws for implementing treaties even on matters outside normal federal jurisdiction, concurrent list, terminology of the preamble. From France, we have borrowed ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity, and from Canada, a quasi-federal form of government, a federal system with a strong central government, distribution of powers between the central and the state governments, residual powers retained by the central government. From Soviet Union, we borrowed fundamental duties under Article 51A, a constitutionally mandated planning commission to oversee the development of the economy, and from other constitutions, emergency provision under Article 356 have been borrowed by Weimar Constitution, that is Germany, amendment of the Constitution from South Africa, due process of law from Japan. The preamble highlights few fundamental values and guiding principles on which the Constitution of India is based. It serves as the guiding light for both the Constitution as well as judges who interpret the Constitution in its light. The starting words of the preamble signify that the power is vested in the hands of the people of India. It is as follows: We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. In our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact and give to ourselves this Constitution. The term sovereign means the supreme or independent, that is, the country is both externally free from any foreign power and internally exercises a free government directly elected by the people. The term socialist in the preamble implies social and economic equality. Social equality means there is no discrimination on the grounds of caste, color, creed, sex, religion, language, etc. Economic equality means that the government will endeavor for equal distribution of wealth and to provide a decent standard of living for all. The term secular implies equality of all religions and religious tolerance. The term democratic means that the government shall be elected by the people. The term republic means the head of the state is elected and not hereditary. The whole of the Indian Constitution is divided into parts consisting of articles, which are as follows. Part 1 having Article 1 to 4 on the Union and its territory. Part 2 Articles 5 to 11 on citizenship. Part 3 Articles 12 to 35 on fundamental rights. Article 14 to 18 right to equality, which provides for the equality before law and equal protection of laws and prohibits discrimination on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, residence or any of them. Articles 19 to 22 talks about the right to freedom. Article 19 provides for the freedom of speech and expression, to assemble peaceably and without arms, to form associations or unions, to move freely throughout the territory of India, to reside and settle in any part of the territory of India, and to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or business with reasonable restrictions as are provided in Article 19 Clause 2 to Article 19 Clause 6. Article 20 provides protection in respect of conviction for offences, that is, from ex post facto law, double jeopardy and self-incrimination, while Article 21 provides for the protection of life and personal liberty, and 21A provides for the right to free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years. Article 22 provides protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. Articles 23, 24 talks about right against exploitation, prohibiting traffic in human beings, begar and forced labor, and employment of children below the age of 14 years in factories and mines. Articles 25 to 28 talks about right to freedom of religion, that is, to profess, practice and propagate religion. Articles 29 to 31 on cultural and educational rights, providing for the protection of minorities and their right to establish and administer educational institutions. Articles 32 to 35 talks about right to constitutional remedies, that is, right to move to the Supreme Court for the enforcement of the rights conferred under Part 3, for which the court can issue directions or orders or writs, including writs of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, quo warranto and certiorari. Under Part 4, starting from Article 36 to 51 on directive principles of state policy, which are the obligations upon the state to be followed for the good governance. These are equal justice and free legal aid, organization of village panchayats, right to work, provision for just and humane conditions for work, uniform civil code, early childhood care and education, organization of agriculture and animal husbandry, protection of environment and wildlife, etc., which the state is trying to enforce for the welfare of the public and good governance of the country. Part 4A, Article 51A talks about fundamental duties of the citizens of India. Part 5, having the articles on the union, is divided into chapters. Likewise, chapter 1, Article 52 to 78 talks about the executive, Article 52 to 73 on the president and vice president, Article 74 and 75 on the Council of Ministers, Article 76 Attorney General of India, Articles 77 to 78 on the conduct of government business, Chapter 2, Article 79 to 122 talks about Parliament, Article 79 to 88 talks about Constitution of Parliament, Articles 89 to 98 on Officers of Parliament, Article 99 to 100 on Conduct of Business of the Parliament, Articles 101 to 104 talks about disqualification of the members, Articles 105, 106 on the powers, privileges and immunities of Parliament and its members, Articles 107 to 111 talks about legislative procedure, Article 112 to 117 talks about the procedure in financial matters, Article 118 to 122 on procedure generally, Chapter 3, Article 123 talks about legislative powers of the President. Chapter 4, Articles 124 to 147 talks about Union Judiciary. Article 124 to 147, Establishment and Constitution of Supreme Court is discussed, Chapter 5. Article 148 to 151 talks about the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Part 6, Articles on the States. Chapter 1, Article 152 on the general definition of State of the Union of India. Chapter 2, Articles 153 to 167 talks about Executive. Articles 153 to 162 on the Governor. Article 163 to 164 talks about Council of Ministers. 165 talks about Advocate General for the state. Articles 166 and 167 talks about the conduct of government business. Chapter 3, Article 168 to 212 talks about state legislature. Article 168 to 177, general articles. Article 178 to 187 talks about the officers of the state legislature. Article 188 to 189 on the conduct of the business of legislature. Article 190 to 193 on disqualification of members. Articles 194, 195 on the powers, privileges and immunities of the Parliament and its members. Article 196 to 201 talks about legislative procedure. Articles 202 to 207 on the procedure in financial matters. Articles 208 to 212 on procedure generally, Chapter 4. Article 213 talks about the legislative powers of the Governor, Chapter 5. Article 214 to 231 on the High Courts in the States, Chapter 6. Articles 233 to 237 talks about subordinate courts. Part 7 consists of articles on states in the Part B of the first schedule, which has been repealed. Part 8, Article 239, 242 on the Union territories. Part 9, Articles 243 to 243O talks about the Panchayat system. Part 9A, Articles 243P to 243ZG on the municipalities. Part 10, Articles 244 to 244A on the scheduled and tribal areas. Part 11 talks about the relation between the Union and the states. It is divided into chapters. Chapter 1, Articles 245 to 255 on the distribution of legislative powers. Chapter 2, Article 256 to 263 talks about administrative relations. Article 256 to 261 general articles. Article 262 on the disputes relating to waters. Article 263 talks about coordination between states. Part 12, finance, property and contracts and suits are discussed in this part. Again, it is divided in chapter 1. Article 264 to 291 talks about finance. Chapter 2, articles 292 to 293 on borrowings. Chapter 3, article 294 to 300 on the property, contracts, rights, liabilities and obligations and also suits. Chapter 4, article 300A talks about the right to property, which has been made a legal right. Part 13, articles 301 to 305 talks about freedom of trade, commerce and intercourse within the territory of India. Part 14, articles on the services under the Union and the states. Chapter 1, articles 308 to 314 talks about services. Chapter 2, article 315 to 323 talks about the Public Service Commission services. Part 14A, articles 323A and 323B are talking about the tribunals. Part 15 talks about article 324 to 329 talking about elections. Part 16, articles 330 to 342 talks about the special provisions relating to certain classes. Part 17, official language. Chapter 1, articles 343 and 344 talks about the language of the Union. Article 343 and 344 talks about the language, official language of the Union. Chapter 2, articles 345 to 347 talks about regional languages. Chapter 3, article 348 and 349 talks about language of the Supreme Court, High Court and etc. other organs of the government. Chapter 4, articles 350 and 351 talks about the special directives. Part 18, articles 352 to 360 on emergency provisions providing for the national emergency on the ground of war, external aggression and armed rebellion. State emergency on the failure of the constitutional machinery in state and the financial emergency. Part 19, articles 361 to 367 are miscellaneous articles. Part 20, article 368 talks about the amendment of the constitution, providing for the amendment of the constitution by the majority of the total membership of each house, that is simple majority, or by a majority of not less than 2/3 of the members of that house present and voting, that is special majority, and by the special majority and the ratification by the legislature of not less than 1/2 of the states. Part 21, articles 369 to 392 talks about temporary, transitional and special provisions. Part 22, articles 393 to 395 talks about short title, commencement, authoritative text in Hindi and repeals. First schedule talks about list of the states and union territories under list 1 and list 2. Second schedule consisting of parts A to E. In this, provisions as to the president, governors, speaker, deputy speaker, chairman, deputy chairman, judges of Supreme Court and High Courts are there, together with comptroller and auditor general. Third schedule, forms of oath and affirmations. Fourth, allocation of seats in the Council of States. Fifth schedule comprising of administration and control of scheduled areas. Sixth schedule provides for administration of tribal area in Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. Seventh schedule consists of distribution of powers and functions between union and states. It contains 3 lists: union list having 97 subjects, state list having 66 subjects and concurrent list having 47 subjects. Eighth schedule talks about the list of the languages, which are 22 in number. Ninth schedule contains acts and orders related to the land tenure, land tax, railways and industries. 10th schedule talks about the provision as to the disqualification on the ground of defection. 11th schedule, which has been inserted through 73rd amendment in 1992, contains provisions of Panchayati Raj. 12th schedule, 74th amendment in 1992 contains provisions of municipal corporation. The First Amendment Act 1951 amends Article 15, 19, 85, 87, 174, 176, 341, 342 and 376 were amended, and Articles 31A and 31B are inserted, and 9th schedule was added to the Constitution. 24th Amendment Act 1971. It affirmed the power of Parliament to amend any part of the Constitution. After this amendment, the President is bound to assent to the Constitutional Amendment Bill. Education was transferred to the concurrent list by this amendment. 42nd Amendment Act 1976. It was enacted during the period of internal emergency. The amendment established beyond doubt the supremacy of Parliament over the other organs of the government. It gave the directive principles precedence over the fundamental rights and enumerated for the first time a set of 10 fundamental duties. It further imposed limits on the power and jurisdiction of the judiciary. It raised the term of the Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha from 5 to 6 years, authorized the use of central armed forces in any state to deal with law and order problems. It made the President to be bound by the advice of the Council of Ministers and envisaged the establishment of administrative tribunals for service matters of government employees and also other tribunals for economic offences. This act also clearly laid down that no constitutional amendment could be questioned in any court of law. 43rd Amendment Act 1978. It received the presidential assent on April 13, 1978. This act repeals the obnoxious provisions of the Constitution which have been passed during 42nd Amendment Act during the emergency 44th Amendment Act 1978. The act removes major distortions in the Constitution introduced during the emergency. The duration of Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies have been reduced from 6 to 5 years. The normal term, which was extended during the emergency under the 42nd Amendment Act to achieve some political purposes. The right to property ceases to be a fundamental right and becomes only a legal right. Any proclamation of emergency need henceforward be issued by the President only after receiving the advice of the Cabinet as a whole in writing. The President will not be called upon to act on the basis of advice by the Prime Minister on his own without consulting his Cabinet. 52nd Amendment Act 1985. The Act has made defection to another party after elections illegal. 61st Amendment Act 1989. It lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. 66th Amendment Act 1990 to bring land reforms within the purview of 9th schedule of the Constitution. 73rd Amendment Act 1992 to ensure direct election to all seats in the panchayats, to reserve seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in proportion to their population, and for reservation of not less than 1/3 of the seats in panchayats for women. 74th Amendment Act 1992 was made to ensure direct election to all seats in nagarpalikas and municipalities. 76th Amendment Act 1994. It relates to the reservation of seats in educational institutes and of the appointments or posts in the services under a state for backward classes, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The Supreme Court had ruled on November 16, 1992 that the total reservations under Article 16(4) of the Constitution should not exceed 50%. 79th Amendment Act 1999. It extends the reservation of seats for SC, ST and Anglo-Indians in the Lok Sabha and legislative assemblies for next 10 years. 80th Amendment Act 2000. It deals with an alternative scheme for sharing taxes between the Union and the states. 81st Amendment Act 2000. It provides that the unfilled vacancies of a year reserved for SC and ST kept for being filled up in a year as per Article 16 shall be considered separately for filling vacancies in the succeeding year, and the previous list will not be considered for filling the 50% quota of the respective year. 86th Amendment Act 2002 provides right to education until the age of 14 and early childhood care until the age of 6. 91st Amendment Act 2004 restrict the size of Council of Ministers to 15% of legislative members and to strengthen anti-defection laws. It also amended Article 75 and 16. It inserted Article 361B and amended the Schedule 10, 97th Amendment Act 2012. This amendment is made with an objective to encourage economic activities of cooperatives, which in turn help progress of rural India. It is expected to not only to ensure autonomous and democratic functioning of the cooperatives, but also the accountability of the management to members and other stakeholders. 101st Amendment Act 2016. It inserts the Article 246A, 269A, 279A to make the smooth application of goods and services tax. This topic presents the overview of the Constitution of India, which is helpful for the students. The topic presents the introduction about the Constitution, that it is the basic law of the land. It introduces to the students about the ideas, principles and concepts which our forefathers have taken from other countries. It presents an overview of the articles and schedule and also some of the major and important amendments which have been made to this Constitution to make it workable and cater to the needs of the contemporary Indian society, thereby making it a living law. With all this information, now we have come to the end of this today's lecture. Do keep in mind what we have discussed today. It is some time for you all to do some self-study also. This is Krishna Kumar signing off. If you want to learn more and enhance your knowledge, you may log on to our website for MCQs, quizzes, LORs on www.cec.nic.in. Till then, goodbye.